Welcome. And here's a little trip that I took to Salt Lake City, originally with the purpose to buy some flavored coffee syrups, and I took advantage of a little trip to explore some old buildings. Now, I used to live in Salt Lake City for about 10 years, but I know the city well, and as soon as I got into this subject, I quickly started remembering all the buildings I'd seen in Salt Lake. Now, this little trip was a very quick trip. Like I said, it had another purpose, but I did spend about a couple hours, mostly downtown, and I was able to visit the old Rio Grande train station, and the Salt Lake Temple, and the Joseph Smith Memorial Building, and a few others. So, the first place I visited was this Rio Grande train station. And here I'm approaching it. A really beautiful building. And pretty much for the last 20 years has just sat in disrepair. I did try to go in it and the doors were locked, but I did end up going in another little section that's kind of affiliated with it. But there is a little restaurant next door, a nice little Mexican restaurant. But here we really have a look at this old style. And so you have the brick, and then you have this facade applied over the top of the brick. And again, really seeming like a kit. And here's a closer look at the bird. You see here it appears at least 3 sections. Like I said, it's been in disrepair. You even see this window here. They haven't bothered even replacing this window because there's nothing going on in this building whatsoever, and hasn't been for about 20 years that I know of, perhaps longer. But the aging is just really apparent. And again, if it looks this old with the surfacing, the brick itself even seems older underneath it. Very, very old brick. Now here, just driving around, just on the same street, just a block away, I went and looked at some other brick, a lot of this yellow, beautiful brick here. But again, really what caught my attention was the mud-flooded windows. This had crumbled off, this cement has crumbled off in some spots, and you can see the brick, and this has almost been just to clean it up. Sometimes it's missing and doesn't seem original. What seems original is that the brick continued down. And again, this winter in Utah, I know the same would be for Salt Lake City, as well as my town, but there would have been snow completely covering this window. And here's another one. And this one, I don't know why it seems even more obvious that this is not the original level. And lots of these all over the place. Really just inviting flooding into your house, and really a pretty foolish idea if one has any understanding of his environment. And here's one that somebody did realize was a bad idea, and they've just bricked it up with a few different types of brick. And Chief down here. And then I went over here. This used to be the old train station, the Union Pacific Railroad. And here's a little look facing the front. And here I took a little peek inside. Here's the lobby. And here we could see a date appear of 1869. In 1869, right around the same time, the Mormons came, give or take, 10 or 15 years at the most. And even in present time, there's a functioning train here, Amtrak and whatnot. Now here's a little plaque, and this is basically commemorating the East meets West, where the train meets in Utah. As Western settlement increased, the need for an overland railroad was voiced by various groups, including Utah pioneers who petitioned Congress. March of 1852. So what, they petitioned Congress while they were still on the wagon trail? The Enabling Act of 1862 authorized construction. And here's a little look at the backside of the train station. I was able to go up some stairs similar to these that we see back here. And then finally, here we are at the temple. And I got really lucky. I just pulled right up and got a parking spot right in the front. And it was a Saturday, so I didn't have to pay. But my dog was in the car, and I left the windows rolled down and just told him I'd run in real quick and be back. So I did feel a little bit pressed and would have liked to linger a little bit more. But nevertheless, it was a wonderful experience. And again, I lived in Salt Lake for, 10 years, and I think that I went in here once, but I don't recall. And if I did, I wasn't thinking the way that I am now. And so it was really nice to see it with fresh eyes. And again, I just wish I had my better camera too. I just had this crappy phone. But it gives you an idea of just the intricacy and the excess of spending. Spending money that the Utah pioneers should not have had. They should have been too busy just settling down and getting things started, not building temples like this. I mean, maybe building something, 1 or 2 stories, maybe 2. I don't even know why 2, but maybe 3. But this? Really? Especially in the name of the Lord, it just seems very opposite and contradictory. So now here is the tabernacle. And the tabernacle actually appears to be even older than the Salt Lake Temple, which really doesn't make any sense. I mean, how are you going to have time in, 10 years to be building both of these structures? And this thing is just massive. More oval shaped than round. I really enjoyed looking at the blockwork on this one. What I could find was that it wasn't all the same stone. Let me look at another picture here. What we could see is that some portions are granite and some are sandstone, and just a big hodgepodge of blocks, I mean, not quarried from the same site. Very well done. And yet we do see the use of a mortar of some type. Here we can see the granite blocks. And at the base here, sandstone. Just really, really interesting. And clearly going down much further. Not sure how much further. And there are some great old pics, but I'm not going to get into that today. And now here's a look at one side. Let's see, this would be facing, I would be facing east. So this would be the west side. And really interesting. This, I saw a lot of things that I had never seen before. And I'm not sure if these are little stars or whatnot. But a lot of symbolism. What we can see is, you have like a sun and a sun. And then underneath here you have a moon and a moon. But this one is like a half moon, and this one looks either new moon or full moon. And the same here. You see you have the sun, you continue down this, you have the moon, and then the star. You have a right side facing star here. A lot of times you have an upside down facing star. And this is actually really interesting. I hadn't noticed this before, but You know, these almost look like some kind of metal mercury balls or something. 1, 2, 3, 4. Not sure, but very interesting to be noticing that. And here too. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So they're not necessary. 6, 7. Not necessary on each one, but for whatever reason, there they are. And I think we watching these videos might have a better idea of what those may be. And here again, and we can get a better look at all the moons here. So you see here's the moon in this position, and the moon in this position, always above the sun first. But yes, the sun pretty much seems to be the same. What changes is the star. See, these are upside down stars. And the moon. And you see all these different moons, full or new, half, waxing or waning. Really interesting. So it made me feel like there's a story here. You know, this is almost acting like a book. And if you could read the code between the star and the sun and the moon, you would really understand what the makers were trying to tell somebody. And here I just wanted to show you this just amazing, block work. This is the granite that they would have quarried, that we're told that they quarried. And just absolutely impressive and sharp and looking machined. I mean, really, come on, with hand tools, you're going to round this off this way, and everything was just beveled and perfect. And I was absolutely impressed with the angles. And even here, look at the detail. And, even though mortar appears to be used, I don't even think that it needs mortar. It's so perfect. And here's a little peek at one of these front doors. I was just blown away. Just this door, and this is a monster. I mean, this thing, figure, if I'm standing up, I don't know, my head is, figure how you'd reach for a doorknob. Imagine just a regular doorknob height. So they've put these on after, but yeah, this is just gigantic. And what we could see is there was 2 statues that used to be here that aren't here anymore. We still see the pedestals. Here we have the upside down star. And there's a bunch of these doors all over the place, all around the building. And I walked up to a few of them. Really beautiful. And just, really impressive block work. Just really amazed that it's even a thought for some that something like this could be done by hand in that time period, with a people just starting out from scratch, persecuted, and they'd have time and money to create something like this. And here again, where the statue clearly would have been, I'd be interested to see if there are any pictures of any old statues here, something worth looking at. And here again, we get an idea of the mass of the block work and the perfection. And again, we're talking about a people that just came here with oxen and pretty much left everything behind and are starting a new life with oxen and wagons. And then, to imagine that within 10 years they're throwing something like this up. Unbelievable. And then just to put, even one level together would be impressive. But this is just over the top and unrealistic. Here we can see the amazing block work. Again, the granite, the sharp, laser-like precision cuts, and really amazing if we're to believe that in the 1850s they're using hand tools to make this. Just a mind-blowing structure. And here I was under an upside-down star. And it's not just cutting blocks, I mean, it's just the angles and everything else. Here I took a little picture of the doorknobs, just, every little corner of this area has something interesting. And so, yeah, these doorknobs, 1853, very interesting. And then just outside here I'm showing the Antiquitech devices, of course. Still in good shape. And here we could see across the street what's called the Joseph Smith Memorial Building. Really, really amazing building that I always loved. And I'll actually go there in a minute here and we'll take a little closer look, but really just a work of wonder. Here's a little building called the Walker Building. I was peeking at it through the buildings. And yes, again, you can see the intricacy. Really beautiful building. But yes, back to the Joseph Smith Memorial Building. Again, seeming as if it was some kind of facade. Now, these were, thick ceramic tile type kit pieces, as if it had just been, put together. Everything is covered in a white porcelain like coating. And here we can get a better look at the tile and a little faceless knight there in the middle. And these lines. And no details were spared with this place. And it seems like that in between era where you have, a lot of ornate woodwork and metalwork and stonework. And this seems in one way new because at the top it says Joseph Smith Memorial Building, but then when I look at things like this, and this could just be some old Masonic symbology here, really interesting. And they do give tours of all of this. It would have been fun to ask some questions. And these little lights on the front, they're like little headlights almost, meant to cast and illuminate. You could see what the older part looked like. And we see the Greco-Roman arches. And then I went inside to have a little look. And here's what we get, just these pretty massive columns. And again, this would have been a hotel, so this was the hotel lobby, I'm imagining. And even in present times, look how it's not being used very much. Just like the temple across the street, it's more about having weddings and little events and just unnecessary to have buildings of such size that are just pretty much unused and unneeded today. And if they're unneeded today with the population that we have, with the largest population, I just can't imagine that they were needed yesterday. Especially people coming in a very primitive fashion, trekking across the country with oxen and wagon. Just no reason for this. First of all, for this door being this size, and all of the doors in this apparent hotel are giant doors. Just ridiculous. And this is not carved. Now, this is carved but out of wood. So everything here was wood, but very beautiful, very, very ornate detail. La Fleur d'Ali up there. And just these carvings tell an amazing story. And I just found myself really walking around and trying to make some sense of these depictions. Even this one right here was really interesting. These angels kind of coming out of a flowery trumpet and about to drop some what look like bombs or grenades of some kind of fruit essence. And yeah, one could just, really dissect all of this. And just an amazing story. Here I went outside and I'm facing, looking across the temple. Again, just really just a bunch of weddings. There's the doors that I was at, and there were the statues, or the lack of the statues. And up here I was just pointing at the signage. You're going to have this glorious multi-million-dollar building, and then you're going to have a cheap sign, what looks like a wood sign with gold painting on it. And obviously, in its heyday, this was probably a stained glass window, pre-inheritance. And I couldn't quite make it out, but yeah, again, just seeming really cheap and aftermarket. And then I turned back around to the Joseph Smith Memorial Building, and you see this, I'm sure what was probably at one point some kind of function, because you really can't see it from down there. I found this little vantage point where I could peek at it and take this picture. But really, from the street level, you're not seeing this just walking around. It's very much out of sight. And the detail that they would invest. And the Utah symbol here is the beehive, that dome looking beehive on top there. And we see the beehive on everything. It's all about this dome and the beehive. Now here's the state capitol. I went for a little drive up here. Originally I thought I'd go take a little peek inside, but I had my dog with me, and instead I decided to go on a little hike with him. There's a beautiful park here east, just like a block, literally, a little ravine down here on the right side, and a lot of people take their dogs there, and so that's where we ended up going. Next time I'll have a little peek in here. It is absolutely gorgeous. And, even for government function, especially at the time it was built, just excess. Excess for Utah. Pretty recent people, even if we are to believe the mainstream narrative. And then on my way out of Salt Lake, I just, there's so much more I really wanted to explore, but I had to go. It wasn't my purpose, but I was glad that I took some time to explore a little. This was a Greek temple, and I just snapped a picture while I was driving. Very dangerous, don't do that. But yeah, just a really nice little Greek temple. Definitely employing these older styles and what seemed like technologies. So that's it for today. I do hope you enjoyed. Have a blessed day, and please like, comment, and subscribe.